Okay, so this session is about disempowering beliefs, and I want to give you a little background because this is not, I am going to be talking about that, but I'm not going to be talking about it the way I thought I was going to be talking about it. And I want to explain why. So this board is a board I believe I've given permission to you. In fact, I'll put it in the chat. This is kind of an ongoing board I work on and invite people to put comments in to expand things. You don't have write permission because it's just too easy a board to mess up. It's if you come down here, remember this little thing, table of contents. I have a start here where I explain it. There are actually four boards here. Each of these have links to this one, which are problems, causes, solutions, and benefits. These are things I see in the Agile space. Disempowering beliefs. This is usually what's causing most of those. Missing concepts. I don't know, I'm zooming back so far, but there are a lot of missing concepts. There are a lot of things that are useful. And I actually want to explain how I come up with all of these. Well, let me show you the fourth one, and then I will. And then there's human-centered development, which is going to have a lot about the book Paula Stewart and I wrote, which is this whole thing is part of the curriculum of the Amplia University. All of these things are addressed. But I want to be clear how I came up with these because as far as I know, this is somewhat unique as a full focus. I know other people have done this, which is from around 2005. I think I got the idea around 2005 that there was some common theme possible. This was when Net Objectives we'd been doing consulting as coaches in process by, well, I guess a couple of years. We'd started out in 99 as basically more of a design patterns training workshop, technical training, TDD, things like that in 99. By 2001, I realized the real problem was the process people were doing. It was just overwhelming to people. They didn't know how to manage their work. And I started getting into Scrum and XP. Well, I'd been doing XP before, but then into Scrum. And by that time, I started hiring some good consultants, and we were doing a lot of process consulting. And I started around 2005, 2006, when I started training in Lean. I saw how Lean kind of tied everything together. And I started thinking, how could we find the distillation of things that was a solution? And literally from around 2005, I actually calculated this once for over the next decade, I had about 10,000 conversations with people, mostly at conferences, sometimes in user groups, things like that. I'm not talking about conversations, sales calls or things. I'm talking about people with practitioners or consultants talking about how to do things. And over that time, in those 10,000 conversations, I was looking for what worked, what didn't work. And by reading books like Don Reinertson, Principles of Product Development Flow, Timeless Way of Building, several other books, knowing about lean and flow, and I started getting into theory of constraints a little late by compared to others, but around 2012, I guess. Uh, I distilled what works and what doesn't work. This is what Amplio is. Amplio is not like my opinion of things. It's a distillation of having watched other people and having done it myself and getting a consistent abstraction. And this table here is one of the things I've seen, like when we talk about the problems, these are what people face, and there's usually some theory, some like, verifiable theory, like first principles. And then this is what we're going to talk about today. But you can see I've got an awful lot of these. So I was trying to figure out which ones was I going to do first. I spent actually a fair amount of time trying to figure out what am I going to do first. Now, there are these three big ones that there's no underlying theory to explain things. We can't know what to do most of the time and run experiments, and we must be purposeful and complete. I disagree with these completely. You must follow to understand. And I was planning today to be, let's pick a few of these and go through them. And I've talked about some of these before. So I'll be candid. This is how sometimes these sessions work, both here and in the other A sessions. I'm still recovering a little bit from the fabulous trip I had, and my body's not adjusted to the time zone shift completely. And I was too tired to really get this done. I was working over the weekend to help one of the ACE members do some major, big kind of planning that even SAFe doesn't do, is too bigger than for SAFe in some ways. But we figured out how to work it into our model, and that was good. And I was just too tired last night, so I just figured, well, sometimes I ad lib, but I usually get to the best sessions, and I think that's going to be a good one. So I'm prepared, but not with slides. So I thought about it last night. I do this exercise, and it's kind of, I'm not saying it's a generic approach, but maybe with my attention deficit disorder that I call rapid mind movement, it tends to work for me. For a variety of reasons, I wake up in the middle of the night, not trying to, just health and my cat walking over me. But I kept thinking about that. I was missing the point. Yes, there are all these problems. Yes, there are all of these disbeliefs. But what is the root cause of all of this? And that's what I thought about. And I realized what it is. It's like amazing. It's right in front of me. But I didn't think about it, didn't realize it until about 5 this morning when I got up. And its inherent simplicity is missing. The whole concept of inherent simplicity, on which Amplio's first principles, factors for effective value streams, the distillation I've done, I kind of realized this back in 2019. I'm going to explain what this is. But I realized it's this one belief that underneath it all is causing all the problems that we have. And I've talked about this a lot, but I want to talk about it more because I want to use an explicit way we overcome the challenges I see people have in Agile. I'm using Scrum as an example, but this is really true everywhere. Everybody has these challenges when you don't get to inherent simplicity. Now, I want to be very clear. I didn't say everybody has these challenges. I said those who don't use inherent simplicity. So if you're using theory of constraints, or if you're using lean, or if you're using flow, I don't care that theory of constraints, well, theory of constraints, that's where inherent simplicity comes from. I don't care if you're doing lean and flow or value stream analysis and you're not using the terms inherent simplicity. That doesn't mean you're not using it. Okay. I don't know how this mug was created, but I can use it. I don't talk about ceramics or whatever, but I'm using it. Lean, flow, theory constraints are all built on top of inherent simplicity, the idea that there are some principles which govern things. Now, this doesn't mean there's not complexity. Of course, there's complexity. If you're doing knowledge work, or let me put it this way, if you've got people involved, there's complexity because there are some things about how people will react you can't possibly predict. I don't care how much you get to know them. Sometimes that's a good thing, by the way, personally and in business. I've been with my wife, I don't know now, about 36 years, and she's still unpredictable, but I usually like that. I say usually, but almost always. We like a little unpredictability. It's where inventions come from. So the thing about inherent simplicity, it doesn't mean we can get things down to a predictable level. It means we can get to a level of understanding what's going on and be effective. So since I'm not sure how much I've talked about inherent simplicity, we do have a video on this, by the way, but I want to talk about it specifically so we can get this very theoretical concept, this mindset, and see how to use it. And I'm going to speak to 3 things. I've already shown you one of them, which is this board. I'm going to speak to this post I wrote this morning in preparation for this. And I want to point out something I'm doing that I've started because I think this is important. I've gone back and forth how I want to work with Scrum. Do I want to just transcend it and ignore it? Do I want to go beyond it? But there's a reason I want to enhance it. And I call it Amplio Scrum because it's not Scrum technically. And there are a couple of reasons for this. I'll say what they are, and that creates the context for the whole session today. So I kind of actually admit, I feel a little like I'm in the Twilight Zone or something for over a decade, for a long time, since, 16 years actually, longer. I have been talking about how Scrum looked at through the lens of lean is good. And that was denied by Ken and Jeff. I said that in 2008. I've talked about how the Scrum Guide is ambiguous and how you need to go beyond it. Now, what's interesting is CSTs, I'm seeing on LinkedIn, CSTs are actually admitting they disagree with each other about what the Scrum Guide means. And I think, well, this is weird. CSTs from Scrum Alliance. This morning, a CST said, oh, he teaches people in his CSM class how to go beyond Scrum, even though it's not Scrum, don't call it Scrum. And I'm like a little bit in the twilight zone because I've been vilified for this type of conversation for years, and now they're doing it themselves. People need a path to go from where they are to where they want to be, not a break. I know Buckminster Fuller, one of my heroes and, remote mentors, I'll say, because I never met him, talks about creating something new. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do here, create something new. I'm not taking Scrum and extending it. I'm paralleling Scrum. I want to be clear about that because the foundation is wrong. And underneath it, what it all is. So this is, I'll put this in the chat too. You might be interested. I still have the last one to do. I was supposed to do that yesterday. I didn't get to it. I'll blame you all for that. Just kidding. It's because I wanted to get ready for this and I didn't have time. But I've been walking toward it. But this is an interesting read. It's why Scrum works. I think this is the best description, by the way, of why Scrum works in this that I've ever seen. Because Scrum does work under certain circumstances. I've used it successfully. And then I talk about why we have challenges. This is one big thing. Actually, I'm going to click to this because there's a great picture here. We need to recognize this, that what works when you have innovators and early adopters may not work when you have late majority. Need to be aware of that. What we've learned, this is the heart of Amplio, actually. So I lay out all the things we've learned, and this is stuff I've written about before. And then the last one I wrote was what Amplio Scrum is, which I'm not going to go into too much, but I'm going to show it a parallel way. But the interesting thing about Amplio Scrum, because I've been trying to say how to do this, I describe it in terms of Scrum, but it isn't built on Scrum. Now, why do I do that? Because if you've been doing Scrum, you don't want to be told, oh, here's something new, because you've already made your investment. But if it can be explained to you in terms of what Scrum is, and you build on the positives there, then you're not making people wrong in adjusting it. And you're building off what they know. And they know stuff. People have learned a lot about Scrum, either through the training, reading the guide, or just the fact that Scrum is built on basic Agile principles of iterative development. So the last piece is how to be an Amplio Scrum coach, which gives more capability. So I suggest reading this stuff later. But here's what I want to talk about: inherent simplicity. And there are four major impediments. I say here a successful adoption of Scrum, but I actually believe these are true for everywhere. Not being fit for purpose. And to some degree or not, all frameworks have immutability in them. I don't care whether they say they are or they're not. In other words, take SAFe, for example. Well, you've got all these pieces and they've all interact with each other. And if you remove any of the pieces, it doesn't work and they don't tell you how to remove it. So they don't claim they're immutable, but for all intents and purposes, they are. The only exception, but it's not a framework, is disciplined Agile. So when I say frameworks that are immutable, that's a problem, but that's not, I'm talking about things like SAFe and Scrum, mostly large scale Scrum, Scrum at scale, things that are frameworks don't have the flexibility to take and remove things. That's why Amplio has what we call a configurable framework as part of it. So it gives you a configurable framework that can be built on anything. These four. So I want to mention these, and then I want some feedback. So think of the work you've done or you've tried to coach or that you've tried to teach other people. And do these four things happen? That it's not fit for purpose because its practices are immutable, either stated or because in practice, or it's incomplete. You have a problem and you don't know what to do with it. Or there's resistance by team members, which is typically shows up as lack of motivation. And then there's slow learning. Now, slow is a relative term. I would claim that the rate of learning in the Agile space is at a snail's pace compared to what it should be. The reason I say that is because I have seen many other people accelerate learning. I mean, I accelerate learning too, I believe, but I've seen lots of people do it, so it's not unique to me. So can you put in the chat or raise your hand and we'll talk about it? Are these four significant impediments you've seen, whether it's Scrum or not? And are there others you've seen and are that aren't sourced by these? I'll open the chat and look. I see there are a couple of things here. Oh, yeah, this is this board from yes, I've looked a little bit of it, but this is very good, Frederick. I'll make a comment, and this is in the chat. You put that to everybody, right? Great. Yeah, this is oh, I forget now. Who did you say this was from again? Whoop, where'd Frederick? Oh, Frederick, you're here. Yeah, you can put it in the chat. I forget who you said now. I just can't think of it off the top of my head.
Dave Westergaard, the name of the author.
I mean, sorry. Oh, Dave Westcott. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. So this is really good. And it's not surprising to me uh, because he's got XP in the middle. Joshua Karevsky, oh, a long time ago, like at least a decade ago, talked about how XP was consistent with lean. And in XP is more consistent with lean than Scrum is, but they both have similar things of attempting to shorten the time, the just in time. XP also has built into it what you could say a Toyota production system has called build quality in and automation. Yeah, missing scalability. That's very good, Thomas. Um, but Scrum would then say that, well, they're not into scaling, they're just at the team. But absolutely, that's correct. So what's interesting here is he lays this out in a very nice way. And this is one of the reasons XP is so good. XP actually, but if you think about it, just by doing paired programming, you cut the amount of work in process in half. That saves a lot of waste and delays. By doing tests first, you get clarity on the specification so you know what you're going to build before you build it. That's the purpose of test-driven development. Vastly misunderstood concept. So XP has in it a way of managing work in process built in, a way of focusing on finishing because you do little steps and you finish a little step, finish a little step, finish a little step. It's very consistent with lean. It doesn't talk about it directly, but when you know lean, you can see it and it's more powerful. So yeah, thanks. I definitely have to talk to him more. And I definitely think this is brilliant. I think this is a greater degree of just of breaking it out than what Joshua did. But it's definitely useful. And this is kind of my point. This strengthens my point. So I'm really glad you brought this up again, Frederick. See, how come Amplio and this when we've never talked to each other? I mean, we're on LinkedIn sometimes together, but we don't really collaborate. How come we could come up with the same things? How come back in 2009 at a conference, four people, myself, Mary Poppendieck, Ken Powers of Cisco at the time, and Dennis Stevens of Leading Agile at the time came up with the same way of doing product management at scale without having talked to each other? The answer is simple, and it wasn't surprising to me. It was a little surprising, oh, it happened, but it wasn't surprising that it could happen because all of us were coming from theories of flow and lean. This is the point. There is this underlying, I think it was either, I think it was Wolfram Mueller, it might have been Peter Merrill, coined the term physics of flow. There are these rules. Now, the interesting thing about these rules, they don't explain everything. See, but we're not binary. A lot of people think binary. I've mentioned this before. Don Reinertson and I were at a conference, and people were debating Kanban versus Scrum, do different kinds of complexity. And he leans over to me and he said, these people have been around zeros and ones too long, meaning they're taking this side or that side. Anytime you take this side or that side, no, you're missing something. There might be a third side orthogonal to them, might be something in the middle. The fact that we're in a complex system does not mean we can't see a lot of what's going on. Most of the stuff we do and build is complex, but most of the stuff we figured out how to build it anyway in a reliable way. Now, in engineering, in the physical aspect of engineering, since we can't see everything, they put in redundancy. In other words, when they put in a bridge that's supposed to say carry 20,000 pounds, they don't design it to carry 20,000 pounds. They probably design it to carry 40,000 pounds. Why? Because they may have miscalculated. Maybe there's a wind gust or something. Maybe something breaks. This is called redundancy. And it's because in the physical world, when something is wrong, you can't fix it immediately. So you put redundancy in to give you some space. Now, in the knowledge work area where we are, you can fix it quickly. You can see it, but only if you get feedback quickly. So this is the key. How do you get feedback quickly? So when you have a miscalculation, when the world doesn't respond the way you thought it would respond, that you could go ahead and fix it. See, when you look at the real major disasters like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, what you find out is usually they were caused. Chernobyl was caused by a design flaw, actually. 3 Mile Island happened because of a small failure where they couldn't see what was going on. You could call that a design flaw as well. So they didn't have a lack of visibility. I mean, they had a lack of visibility. They couldn't see what was happening. And even if they did, they couldn't have done as much about it as you'd like. In knowledge work, we're more able to make changes unless you're building hardware. And then you're somewhere a hybrid between the two. That's still knowledge work. But software development for sure, digitization for sure, you can make changes. So Goldratt surmised that we could see what's going on. He calls it inherent simplicity. I'm going to go through that post I made because it's a nice layout of it. But he doesn't say we see it all. He says there are these causes and effects. Some of them we see in advance, and some of them we only see after the fact because it's complex and you can't see everything. But what I'm suggesting, and what I know he was suggesting, is you can see enough to move forward with certainty of getting to the solution. And we've injected so many beliefs in Agile that throw away what we know. I'm going to talk today about inherent simplicity, inherent simplicity and how we can figure out how to move forward. But people talk about how we don't know what to build. And I'm telling you, if you are building software or a product and you don't know the purpose of it, and if that purpose is changing, so if you don't know the purpose and if that purpose is changing, then you don't know what you're doing. Unless it's a totally new product. But even there, you should know what you're doing. You may not know how to build it. You may not know if it'll be successful, but you should know what it is. But this talk about we can't know the goal is absurd. And this was discussed in the book, How Big Things Get Done. And a great example is the Guggenheim Museum Bilbao, right? Did I say that right, Thomas? Okay, good. Hey, thank you. I just have to look how it's spelled. I don't know where I get that other pronunciation from. But anyway, they knew what that building wanted to achieve. They didn't know how to achieve it. And then they designed it to the North Star of what the objective is. I'm going to give a real simple example. So I'm a decent cook, actually pretty good on some things. And I've been getting into soups and stews. So I make this soup my wife loves that's vegetable and chicken based, but I kind of wanted something that had a little more meat in it, and a bison is healthier, so I was going to use bison. So I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish with this soup. I want it to be hearty. I want it to be satisfying. I'm a diabetic, so it had to meet the requirements of diabetes, which basically mean no grain in it, things like that. So I use a mix to start with, just basically legumes and things like that, just simplifies it. But it's dry, it's all, and then I throw my other stuff in. And I know what I want this to be in the first batch I make. Now, by the way, when I make soups, I know how to make them. I make 4 quarts of it because it's almost as easy to make 4 quarts as 1 quart. But given I know there's certain uncertainty in the implementation, I don't make 4 quarts. I make 2 servings. Why? Because I don't want to waste it if I don't like it. I want to be able to navigate to where I'm going. So I make this small batch. And it's not bad. On a scale of 1 to 5, I guess it's about a 3. It's edible, tasty, met the requirements health-wise, but not as good as I would like. And after eating it, I realized, Al, what you didn't put in are some extra carrots and celery and some spices. So I do it again. Now it's better. Notice what happened here, though. My implementation changed. My goal did not budge. Now, sometimes goals budge when you realize there's a better target, but typically, if you've been in the field and you know what you're doing and you've studied the customer, you don't discover a better target. You discover a better way to get to the target. And this is the other aspect of this. So, in process, inherent simplicity will help us improve process. It's another situation when it comes to helping us with what we're building. And I've written a test case on this as well. Okay, so I'm going to pause. Are there any comments? Remember, I asked the question as well. These four, can people put in? So Thomas did answer that it doesn't help you scale. Have you seen these four things? Are these impediments for you? Are they not impediments? Have you seen these? So just say, yeah, I saw it. No, I didn't. Yeah, I see you're nodding. Yeah, people are saying. So why are these there? How do we get around these? That's my question. Is it worth getting around these? Well, I know it is because I've gotten around these. This is what I teach in Amplo University. So, yeah, Rick.
Yeah, I had a question about purposefully incomplete, if that's the same as gatekeeping.
Explain how you mean. Okay. You mean if you're not going to get past this if you don't have this other information. Yeah, very good question. No, I do not mean that. So, in gatekeeping, you're saying something's not to go past me unless we've met this stuff. And if like I'm trying, one of the things I'm trying to have the gatekeeping manage is that everybody knows about what's coming, then that would see, okay, well, I'm missing something here to get through the gate. Okay. By the way, gatekeeping can be good and bad. So since you brought it up, I'm going to mention it. And I'm a firm believer in the definition of ready. Everybody likes definition of done. A lot of people vilify definition of ready, but ready simply means we are ready to do this. And it could be simple. It shouldn't be used as a gate per se. It should be used as what do we need so we don't start this thing too soon. And therefore, we might say it's incomplete or I don't want to be complete to get going because we know it's agile and we'll discover things as we go. So you can sometimes gatekeeping is about getting too much in and we'll say we'll be incomplete moving forward, but then you've got to look at what do you need and what do you not need. No, by this I mean a lot of people, Scrum in particular, highlights that they're purposely incomplete. The idea is you've got this solid framework and you let the teams figure out what to do because it's too much. It overwhelmed people if you gave them everything. So you give a framework within which to accomplish something, which, by the way, they don't tell you what it is you're trying to accomplish. They give you a how to do something like a sprint. But what's the intention of the sprint's not stated clearly. And the idea is you're purposely incomplete, really because you don't want to overwhelm people and you don't have a way of being complete without overwhelming people. This is what I call, I wrote something about the accommodations. I'll make a list of these when I post this. How accommodations in the past, in fact, we did this last session, I'm pretty sure, that accommodations in the past, we've now kind of have to go beyond them. Here, I'll pull this up. I think we talked about this here, right here, that there is this reality. We must react according to what's happening. The accommodation has been, there's no belief. There's no theory, rather. Complexity means we can't predict what will happen. So we have to run experiments and we can't overwhelm. So we become purposeful and complete. Yes, Susan.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that the whole thing about having a framework where you tell people how to do things encourages their mental activity to jump to how to solve something before you understand what it is you're trying to solve.
Yes, very nice observation. See, I believe most of the problems we have in the agile space are because of this kind of framework thinking that sets us up. But what we want to acknowledge, we really want to acknowledge this, that back in 95, we didn't know this stuff. Back in, even at the Agile Manifesto, few understood this. And there were a couple of them who were there at the Agile Manifesto writing, but not many. And this was, about 18, I forget how many exactly, but in the teens. And they were outvoted. And then 10 years later, I was invited to the 10-year anniversary of it because David Anderson and I had kind of put Kanban on the map. And we couldn't get any agreement about what Agile meant. People tend to like to ignore that. But this is what's insidious. The question that I almost never see asked when somebody discusses an issue in the Agile space on LinkedIn is, why did that happen? See, I wrote about this. One of the big missing beliefs is something I wrote called, that's 100 years old, literally, exactly 100 years old, Stewart's description of common cause versus special cause errors. If things are happening because it's the system, these are common cause errors, then maybe we ought to understand why they're happening, and that's where inherent simplicity comes in. So let's come back to this. So yeah, so there's even more impediments to this. Susan, that's another one. In fact, let's put that. People, I'm going to write that in to remind me, people using frameworks tend to jump to solutions. Now, why does that happen? Because frameworks tend to have you solve impediments. In fact, that's Scrum's whole thing. Let's solve impediments instead of let's get to where we're trying to go. Maybe we're having a problem because we're going the wrong way. Maybe we should understand what we're trying to do and then come up with a solution. Frameworks as solutions to problems have us not look at if there are alternatives. See, the framework isn't the start. The framework is what you get after you've seen where your problems are and how you want to do things. Okay. So what I'm going to do is talk about what's the cause of these. I'll introduce Goldratt's concept of inherent simplicity. And after that, I'll show how inherent simplicity can overcome each of these impediments. So not being fit for purpose is when fully cross-functional teams cannot be created or are inappropriate, and they sometimes are. You can't get them and you don't want to get them. I've been in several situations where this is true. It's not just it works everywhere they're a complex environment. No, there are times when you might have the first case I actually taught Scrum, I was involved in this. I was working on an engineering team, helping an engineering team support another 100 engineering teams. So I was with a team that was supporting the other 100, but the other 100 were supported by 10 metallurgists, which meant they were split. Each metallurgist had to do about 10 teams help. They actually were all working together in a Kanban-ish style, though Kanban didn't exist then. They didn't want to hire 90 more. They weren't able to train people on the teams to do this metallurgy. These are all PhDs with an average of 8 years experience. I have a master's in math, and these guys were using formulas I was familiar with, very familiar with. I'd proven the value of like Laplace, Fourier transforms, all sorts of stuff like that. And when I saw what they were doing, I was like, how can you possibly use these for that? I was impressed. It was going over my head. Now, not everybody's got a master's in math, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So, yes. And that's right, Thomas, what you're saying. You can add these things. There are two pieces of extending Scrum. One is you can add, but the question is, how do you know to add and how do you know to make decisions? And the other one is it's missing the theory, makes it so when you do add the theory, you'd go beyond it. Anyway, so sometimes it's not fit for purpose. How do you solve when you don't have cross-functional teams? What happens when teams can't plan ahead? See, this is where flow comes in useful. That's why you see all this hybrid, Scrum and Kanban. People won't like go over their frameworks, though. Kanban's not really a framework, but the way it's taught now is somewhat that way. So we've taken two recipes, put them together instead of what's the common underlying theory that would help us do either and do a blend. And the problem is at a company level, this goes to the whole scale thing, Thomas. if you're a manager who's got, say, 10 teams working for you, and you've decided you're going to adopt a framework to get consistency, then the last thing you want to do is, if you want consistency, is give some people the choice to do Scrum and some people the choice to do Kanban. So you try to pick one, and everybody does one or the other. I mean, they do one. It's this whole thing that it's like recipes. We want to get the underlying thinking. Being purposely incomplete means they must reinvent known practices that would otherwise fit their situation. Disciplined Agile gets around this, by the way, with their, the DA browser, where they give you all these solutions. The problem is the browser is still hard to navigate because it's just a bunch of solutions. It's ubiquitous that you have resistance by team members, usually showing up as a lack of motivation. You see this all the time. That's because even if you have a good practice, if people don't understand it, they resist it. This is proven. I wrote this up. I've talked about it, Semmelweis, where he proved with data, dramatic data, about why disinfecting hands were so important. But at the time, there was no germ theory. How he got the idea, it was just, I think he figured he had to decouple, in a sense, what the pathologies, they were doing, and the then working on women were, there was a maternity ward. So this is a known thing. Resistance is due to lack of understanding. And then there's slow learning. Da Vinci talked about this. Actually, this has been talked about for centuries and centuries. This is the big thing. Experience teaches nothing. There's no experience to record without theory. Without theory, there's no learning. And that is their trouble. That is their downfall. People copy examples and wonder, what is the trouble? I've talked about this. Inspect and adapt versus PDSA. Very dramatic. So here's the interesting thing about inherent simplicity. See, Goldratt, and I really believe this is why The Choice is one of my top 3 books to read. The other 2 are The Obstacle is the Way, which is an odd book, Stoic book, but it's about looking at what's stopping you and then, taking that as the insight on how to move forward. It comes from Marcus Aurelius. And Timeless Way of Building, because I believe that talks about how to do scalable design of things with pattern languages and stuff. And a close fourth would be Don Reinertson's Principles of Product Development Flow, second generation lean product development. But inherent simplicity says that reality, any part of reality, is governed by very few elements, and any existing conflict can be eliminated. If we take that as a given, as absolutely correct in every situation, we'll find ourselves thinking clearly. Now, there's something interesting. He says, if we take that as a given, you may not understand it, but if you believe that, you think clearer because you get down to specific things. If we dive deep enough, we'll find that there are very few elements at the base, the root causes, which through cause and effect connections are governing the whole system. Now, I probably in the post should have added this. He doesn't say you see all of these. You may not see all of these. You may see them only after the fact. But if you go forward with what you do see, you can manage your work in complex situations. Okay. So I'm just you could look at, I'll throw this up here if you want to scroll yourself, put it in the chat again in case somebody came late. But the key is this. People try to create complicated solutions. So yes, simple is good, but sufficient and elegant is more important. So we go between these two, simple, complex, simple, complex, simple, complex. What Goldratt is saying is there is a simple that explains. So simple that doesn't explain and complex that over-explains. There's something in the middle, simple that explains. And that's what he's talking about. See, this is the real problem. That if you believe reality is complex, you're looking for sophisticated explanations and you can't find them. This is the real key right here. The hardest thing to do is to struggle to find an answer to a problem when we believe there's a high chance that it doesn't have an answer. It's so easy to give up. I should add, by the way, this is true when your manager is coming in your office twice a day asking you when it will be done. Pressure makes this worse. See, if I'm not really sure that there's another way to do it, I might stay inside my box of limitations. I don't look outside of the box. I don't remember if I put the quote in, but I should have. Edgar Schein's comment, we don't think and talk about what we see what we are able to think and talk about. So we're in a box, we're left in the box. Now, this is where I talk a little bit about, I mentioned this already. This is basically what I've been doing. I keep doing it. Now I do it in the Amplio University by talking to people, interacting with them, and then they tell me what works and what doesn't work. They give me new ideas. Like this. Oh, that's interesting. Here's something. This is another angle on how to look at this. There are a lot of good angles on how to look at it. I'm not saying there's only one way, and I'm not saying I've got the right one. Okay, so I've shown you this before, and I'm just going to leave it up here, but these are the key things. These first principles are, I would claim, a reflection of Goldrat's inherent simplicity. In other words, multitasking causes delay. There's a cause and effect. Delays in getting feedback causes waste. Our challenges are caused by the system, common cause. People working beyond capacity cause delay, which causes extra work. Working on things of lesser value is wasteful. We can complete a subset of a larger item faster than the full item. Smaller is typically faster. We only see what we think and talk about. We can't manage what we don't see. Local improvements don't result in global necessarily result. Maybe they do. See, this is a reflection of inherent simplicity. Does anybody have like concerns or misfeelings about this, or do we agree these are truths? These aren't my truths. These are my observations of how the world works. Do these match your observations of how the world works? See, because if you get that, then you could have guidance. Like this is basically, see, these are first principles. These are the way it is. This is how to take advantage of that. Like keep workload within capacity. That's not a first principle. That's guidance from the first principles. Do you see the distinction? Working beyond capacity causes delays. So don't do that. Rick, yes.
The term presupposition is coming to mind.
Yes.
Is that the idea here behind first principles? Is we've established a presupposition of where these came from?
Well, I'm saying that these come from the fact that here's where these came from. These came from me observing that when you followed these things worked, and when you didn't follow these things, they didn't work. And I'd been doing this for about 15 years, from about 2004 to 2019. And then I read The Choice. And there was, these things I've been searching is what Goldrat calls inherent simplicity. So the presupposition is that there are a few things that are at the core. And I'd been searching these from a pragmatic point of view of having noticed and having read. I mean, Don Reinertson talks about these a lot. He talks about cost of delay, talks about managing queues. So I wasn't doing this in isolation. I was doing this, as I said, literally 10,000 conversations and having read a few key books. The two key books that broke this open for me, well, I should say Choice, but I already mentioned The Choice. There are really three books that broke this open for me. Reinertson's talking about principles. Timeless Way of Building, which gave me a way to hold everything without dealing with thousands of things. And then this concept of inherent simplicity. And until I had inherent simplicity in my mind as a way to hold it together, to be candid, I had a lot of stuff like this, but I couldn't put it in a simple, well, maybe it's not simple, but I simplified the difficulty of explaining it tremendously. I had fewer pieces. Yes, I have too many pieces still, but I had an order of magnitude more pieces. But here's the beauty of this. And thank you, Susan, for this insight some session months ago. These are first principles, but you can verify these with your own experience. These are foundational. There's a really good definition of them right here. I didn't make this a link, but basically this is Farnham Street blog. I highly recommend it. I don't pay for many subscriptions, but I do pay for this thing. And he has the best definition of first principles I've seen. I talk about it a little bit, but he goes for a page or two. These go back to Aristotle, by the way. First principles of Scrum are not first principles of knowledge work. Those are the principles that Jeff Sutherland uses to explain why Scrum works. But those are things he's surmising. They're not based on reality per se. Okay, then what you do, so from the first principles, there's guidance. But then one of the things that I've been playing with for also a long time is how do you know if something's good or not good? And I came up with these things I call factors for effective value streams. In other words, if you're trying to make a decision, if you can work on smaller increments, if you can get actionable feedback, anything that moves you along the axis here is a good thing to do. These have settled down. I used to change these almost weekly for a couple of years, but they've pretty much settled down, I think. Not that they're the absolute right ways. They're just my best way of explaining it. I've kind of solidified it. And again, thanks to the Amplio University people, they tell me where I'm wrong or what I leave out. Okay. So first principles enable people to see if they're acting consistent with the physics of flow. Factors for effective value streams provide us insight into how we can improve our work. Now, I'm not saying you never run experiments. Sometimes you're in a situation where you don't know what to do, but most of the time, I'm very clear when I make a suggestion, it's going to work. Actually, I don't usually make suggestions. I'm very clear that when I guide them to understand it, they'll come up with a thing that's going to work. So the point is, if we go back to these four things, in fact, I'm not sure, I thought I'd gone through them, but I guess I didn't. Let's go through. I didn't actually talk enough. That when you have this inherent simplicity, it guides you what to do in these situations. You don't have to worry about being purposely complete. I use these factors for effective value stream. I'm not worried about being purposely complete. I just need enough points that I can figure out how to map in between them. I use patterns for that. That's another thing, but that's still how I do it. People don't resist because they understand. If people can understand what's in it for them, they will move forward. If you can show there's less risk. Movement forward. Let me actually type this in. Understanding and lowering risk moves change forward. Not understanding and increased risk holds it back. Okay, so let me look at what you said, Thomas. Oh, I like the word qualm, by the way. That's good. We were talking about when you're kind of uncomfortable. That's a good word for it. Governed by very simple rules and nonetheless exhibit comments. Is that you can have a dynamic system where very simple rules, which nevertheless exhibit. That is to say, you know all that's going on. It's simple, but you still can't predict what's okay. Yes. But that's not knowledge work. That's something else. I'm not saying there aren't systems that exhibit complexity that you can't understand. Okay. This reminds me of the game of life, by the way.
Yeah, and it's fascinating that even though it's really extremely simple, it's all deterministic. You can very simply regenerate it. You still have this very chaotic and complex behavior. And
Yes.
it's actually interesting to think about where that complexity is coming from, because it's definitely not in the rules, right? And there's no divine or magic or quantum fluctuation intervention. It's all determined by the simple deterministic rule. But it is one example of a situation where even though you know there's inherent simplicity in the rules that govern what's happening, and you can
Yes.
describe it completely and exhaustively, you
This
still
is
It doesn't mean that you can tell, hey, in generation 10,000, in the middle, is it going to be on or off, right? There's no way for you to simply forecast these things.
Yes. So I'm really glad you brought this up because I have an answer for this. It's because I've given a lot of thought to this as well. Um, hang on, I'm trying to find the graph. I need a graph. Crap. Might be in one of my books. Here, this is important. There is a give me one more minute and then I'll move on. Yeah. Oh, it's in this book. It comes from this book called Normal Accidents. Perot. Okay, so let me find Perot because I know that's will be somewhat unique. So damn, I really need this picture to explain this. Let me try one last thing. Perfect. There's a post on the website. This is the picture I'm looking for. Okay. So you're right. This is Perot is the guy who investigated 3 Mile Island and then got interested in this whole issue of complexity. And this goes back a way. This is actually pre-Snowden's work. I'm not sure how this influenced him or not. But what Perot did is he looked at things and he had a two-dimensional graph. Notice this is whether we have loose or tight coupling, and this is whether the interactions are linear or complex. And what's important to notice that the nuclear plant is up here. Highly complex, highly tight coupling. Now, notice though what's down here, research. Highly complex, but not highly coupled. This gives you an insight into how to solve the issue you're talking about, Thomas. There are many examples, by the way, of you brought up. If you look at, let me see if I can find this here. While you guys are looking at that, let me see if I can find, there's just pausing the share, getting into something. There,
So would it be correct to conclude from what that chart that you're showing here that inherent simplicity as in loose coupling, or that it's related to loose coupling?
what I'm saying is that in the world we're in, see, here's another example, this three magnet problem where
Yeah.
they look at, if you have these three magnets, if you start the
Deterministic chaos. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, see, this
Fractal
is
and
the
so on.
idea. You're talking about chaos. This is one of the things I've been talking about for a long time. Our problem is not complexity. Our problem is nonlinearity. And complexity often causes nonlinearity. The question then is, can you stop it? Can you stop the nonlinearity? And the answer is, well, maybe. In the physical world, you can't stop nonlinearity because it's in a way that's happening and you can't physically change it. When 3 Mile Island started having problems, it was too late because you couldn't go in there and you couldn't go in there and fix things. So, so what happens is you have to ask yourself, is there a way to deal with things when you're in a nonlinear system? And I messed up something on my screen. I hate how this happens sometimes. Here we go. So here, I'll give you an example of the difference between the physical and the physical world and knowledge work, which is in the physical world. Oh, I'm in the wrong book. She wants me to pick her up. That's her problem.
The physical world, are you talking about like in manufacturing?
Yeah, and literally the world as it exists around us, and whether manufacturing or that we're actually building something, and that where it has a nature of physicality. In the physical world, like building pyramids, say, like this. See, this is funny because in the physical world, you would notice that there's something wrong. You never get to this point. This was not a nonlinear event, it just kept going. In the software world, however, things like this can happen because we go off in the wrong direction and we don't notice it. So a simple mistake of direction of how we're building causes a big problem. This doesn't happen in the physical world in some sense because we see it. But the other thing is sometimes in the physical world, when things go wrong, it's impossible to fix it. That this is somehow net balance. So when you're talking here, the thing is you've got a nuclear plant that's complex and tightly coupled, but in R&D we don't have to, we can have loose coupling. So we have this ability to maybe not predict, but respond. And what's interesting about the example you mentioned, Thomas, it's all based on simple rules. So it's not the complexity that kills us. It's that we can't deterministic either due to nonlinearity or because of things we don't see. So if I come back to here, what we want to recognize is that if we attend to the inherent simplicity where we look to see what we can understand, then we can adjust. And when you come up with examples which it looks like this idea doesn't work, I'm going to suggest they're in the physical world. By the time 3 Mile Island started noticing what was happening, it was too late to do anything about it because it was now physical things you had to change. Whereas in knowledge work, you can find things faster with automated testing and you could fix it if you're writing code well. Now, a lot of people don't write code well and it's very difficult to fix it, but it's not inherent in the problem. So here's the question. So Thomas, does that ease your qualm, so to speak?
Not really, to be honest. But we don't need to get hung up on it.
Okay. Well, let me suggest this. Maybe it's not absolute, but can you see you can make better decisions if you pay attention to the stuff you can see? That's really the point.
Yeah, no, so having a qualm just means that I don't think it's universally applicable. But of course, there are many areas where it does help you a lot to understand the simple mechanics at the bottom of it. I just wouldn't go as far as saying there's always a simple solution or a simple underlying mechanism. And if you just keep searching for it long enough, you'll find the gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah. Okay. So let's qualify that because I agree with this kind of discourse we're having. What we're doing here is we're refining a supposition. So two things. One, I will say I didn't say it works everywhere. I said in knowledge work. Okay, but then there's another thing as to why I agree with you. Keep the qualm in a sense. In other words, yeah, I know that sounds funny.
Keep the qualm. That's a
Yes.
good motto.
But here's why. Here's why. Because it means you're looking at the question, how much can I control things with the limited predictive ability I have? So I'm agreeing we have a limited predictive ability. Now, in knowledge work, I'm saying that's not that limited, but it's still limited. So the question is, how much can I control things given this limited ability? And what I'm suggesting is that you have to be a little skeptical about what I'm saying. I agree with that. Be skeptical about it. But notice how if you act as if it's true, it provides you the ability to move forward. And the way you deal with the concern is quick feedback. So
Yeah.
actually, you're giving me a way to say this clearer. So that's why I appreciate this kind of interaction. So
And
let me.
I love Susan's take on it. Look at the chat.
Oh, I
It
didn't
is
see.
excellent. It's perfect. See it?
Yeah, keep calm. Yeah, that's good.
Keep calm and carry on.
That is good. Thank
That's a
you.
really
I was just out in London too, or UK. That's I'm gonna have to steal that. Keep calm and
that's a good one, Susan.
that is really good. Yeah, so keep calm and carry on. That's right. So I'm not I love it. I love it.
It's
Uh
good.
I just got to pause for a minute. This is one of the things I love about, Susan, and actually a lot of people are Susan and Thomas and Patrick and Rick and Beasley, actually almost everybody. It's so great about Ample University is nobody, I don't care how expert you are in leading something, knows everything and knows all the angles. So this interaction is really nice. So let me restate it. And we've run over, but what I'm suggesting is that this attitude that you can see the solution, whether you can or can't, it moves you forward. And then that's the carrying on. And keeping calm is I don't trust it 100%. Because something could happen, either it could be nonlinearity, it could be some simple relationship. So in knowledge work, I can get actionable feedback. This is the distinction. In knowledge work, I can get actionable feedback, meaning when I get feedback, I can turn it around. I can do something about it. What happened in 3 Mile Island is they couldn't do that. What happened in Chernobyl, which was a different problem, they actually had a design flaw, which was, they used cooling rods to slow down a reaction. And the way they made the cooling rods in in Chernobyl, they tipped them with something, I forget the material. It made it cheaper to build them this way. But what they didn't pay attention to was that when you first put them in the water, it actually increases the radioactivity, the interaction for a little bit. And then as it gets further in the water, it goes down. So you were near a real problem, and they stick these rods in to stop the problem. But in fact, for a short time, it makes it go up. So of course, nobody had thought about this. This is why complexity happens, because you didn't see it. But worse, even if they did think about it, it was too late because there was no way to go in there and slow the reactor down. And the cooling rods were a poor design, the way they did it. So yeah, I need to extend this article a bit because you use inherent simplicity. But see, here's the thing that I didn't tie into this article that I need to. I mentioned timeless way of building. The reason patterns can work, Alexandrian patterns, not in fact, I think I wrote something on this that there's a difference between solution patterns as solutions to a recurring problem and patterns as solutions to a recurring problem in a context. They're different. See, Scrum patterns are patterns to solutions. I mean, to problems. They're solutions to problems, but they're in a set context one way. My patterns, Amplio patterns, are solutions in a context. With inherent simplicity, you get to pick how you want it to be. You see things, so you can adjust things. So what happens is you can be fit for purpose because you can adjust. You don't have to be purposely incomplete because you've got patterns to support what you're doing. But patterns only exist because of the notion of inherent simplicity, that there are forces to attend to. You don't have resistance because people understand what's in it for them and learning is accelerated. And that's what I'm suggesting. So inherent simplicity gives us the ability to do this. And then we can build patterns on top of inherent simplicity. Chris Alexander presupposed this. He just didn't worry about this whole complexity issue. But for mere mortals, I can like the understanding of it. Okay, so let me check the chat. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice, Rick. Okay, any other comments? Yeah, good. See, this also, I know I was going down a little, maybe at first a rat hole, but this is a subtle issue, Thomas, what you keep bringing up. Other people have brought it up as well. And I think now for the first time, I've got a nice way of saying it thanks to Susan. Okay, we all good? Okay, I'll get this up. I'm going to extend this article with a few things.
Yeah, quickly, Al,
Yeah, busy.
I thought you have one image that shows this non-linearity. Can you bring it up if you can still remember where it is? That explains the fact that when you deal with the non-linearity, maybe through feedback, you are able to get to complexity and things like that, something like that.
Well,
there was an image I think you had some time ago. I'm not sure.
I have something else. I'm not sure it's what you mean, but let me show you how I look at it. This might be there. I do talk about this at times. That is this what you're talking about?
Okay.
See, I don't like saying there's complex, complicated, chaos, and simple domains. No, they're all complex. Everything has a certain amount of complexity, nonlinearity, complicated, and simple in it.
Yeah.
So when
Thanks.
you look at this, if you're in complex, you're basically saying, I don't know what to do. If I'm here, I say, well, I could do stuff. I can deal with nonlinearity by having feedback. I can deal with complicated by understanding. Simple is understanding. Complex, yeah, it's out there. So again, I use feedback. Is this a picture you meant, or was there another one?
Yes. This is that's fine. Thanks. I've captured it.
This is important. So what you're saying, Thomas, is that there's always some degree of this. So we always have some uncertainty about what we're doing. And yes, I'm acknowledging that.
So we shall keep calm and carry on.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm going to use that. That's a great way to
excellent.
stop certain conversations too. I love it. It's got so many uses. Okay, we all good then? Anything else?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.